Welcome to the Channel Angle, where we break down tech trends with a channel-first lens. I'm Cass, and in this episode, we are focused on one of the most urgent and evolving areas in tech, the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. From Palo Alto Network's bold moves to the rise of Gen AI and security operations centers, CRN's senior editor for cybersecurity, Kyle Alspach, helps us decode what is hype and what is real, and what it all means for you as the partner. So whether you're an MSP thinking about making the leap to an MSSP, or a vendor trying to get your partner enablement game strong, this one's for you. I have with me one of our senior editors, Kyle. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So for our audience, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here at CRN and your expertise.
I'm the senior editor for cybersecurity at CRN, so I focus on all the different cybersecurity goings on, whether it's cyber attacks or vendors putting out new products or the latest threats that are occurring. So just anything cybersecurity related is my focus.
So you had a really big year last year with that little CrowdStrike situation.
Yeah, that was very surprising to everybody. Very interesting from a cybersecurity perspective because it was more of an outage as opposed to a cyber attack. So very interesting to cover that one.
Yeah. There was a lot of articles flying back and forth. So thank you so much for your hard work on that and keeping us all up to date. And so now here we are in 2025, and we've got some new things on the horizon. So let's talk a little bit about your most recent article about Palo Alto. And you've covered a lot on their financial performance, specifically with AI-driven security strategy. You've really been looking at that very closely recently. So it seems like despite their revenue growth, they've got some stock issues. Do you see this as something that's a broader issue for vendors who are looking into building a cybersecurity with an AI focus? Is that something that people should be concerned about when it comes to their stock prices?
I actually think that the stock price, a lot of the time, especially for companies that are otherwise doing well, doesn't actually mean all that much. I think that it does fluctuate, and sometimes the factors that affect the stock price don't actually really have anything to do with whether the company is innovative or growing or creating opportunities for channel partners. And I think in the case of Palo Alto Networks, I think they're doing very well. Especially when it comes to AI and using that for security and thinking about where that goes next. I actually think that they're kind of leading the pack on that in a lot of ways. Even though they are the largest, standalone security vendor, I do think that they've continued to find ways to, to keep up with what's happening in the market.
Yeah, and how does XAM fit into that recently, right? We were talking a lot about that in the article, and it's something new that they're coming to market with. How does that fit into their innovation?
Well, XIM is interesting because it definitely is very focused on AI and especially machine learning. And it was kind of, out a bit before Gen AI. So it's not necessarily based on, the Gen AI technology, although that's starting to happen. But it's a very interesting product because it competes in the market for SIEM, SIEM. And that's just a huge market and a market that's seeing a lot of change. That's what was behind Cisco's huge acquisition of Splunk, for instance. So what Palo Alto is doing there, I think, is definitely something that people are starting to watch, and I think it could really be a big shift potentially for the industry. Their approach does seem to be pretty different from the way that most of the SIM players have done it traditionally. One of the big moves that Palo made, relatively recently was to make a big acquisition from IBM. So essentially bought a part of IBM's SIM business, which is called QRadar. They just bought the SaaS part of it, but that's been a huge boost to Palo Alto. I think, as far as, SIM goes, SIM is, a huge product that's used in the security operations centers, and every SOC uses one. And, this is just a major thing for Palo Alto to kind of potentially be able to jump into, a much higher tier in SIM with this acquisition. So, I mean, I think Palo Alto is pretty set up to do some interesting things in this market.
Any word on what that means for partners? Have we heard anything yet?
Yeah, I mean, especially the larger partners. I mean, XIM is sort of more of an enterprise product still at this point. But I mean, the thing that happens with these products is often that that's just where they start, and it will eventually make its way down to smaller partners. But the larger ones definitely are already finding some opportunities with it.
I think being able to have an idea of what enterprise clients are doing and how that's going to impact the smaller businesses and vice versa is such a critical part, especially with cybersecurity being such a critical part of everyone's infrastructure and what everyone needs to be providing in the channel. I wanted to talk to you a little bit more. You mentioned AI and Gen AI and machine learning and all of that. So let's talk a little bit about how that's impacting cybersecurity. From your reporting, how do you see Gen AI reshaping security operations? Is it a threat detection response thing? Is it, vendors just integrating it more into their platform? What are you seeing?
I think that, right out of the gate, it's been kind of what you would expect, which is every security operations product now has an AI assistant that you can chat with. However, in security operations, that's actually a very useful thing to have, just because a lot of times when cybersecurity teams are trying to investigate a threat or understand what's going on, they have to sift through a lot of data and, potentially be switching a bunch of screens around, and it can just get to be a very tedious thing that doesn't necessarily always move very quickly, which is not good when you're facing a cyber threat. Having sort of a chat interface where you can ask the bot to go find you some information or tell you what it thinks about some certain threat that you think you're seeing, that can actually be a really powerful thing. So I think even just having even chatbot in a security operations product is actually a really powerful thing, even though that is kind of a little bit of a basic kind of product for that usage as far as Gen AI goes. But I think it's just going to get more useful, as time goes on, and just the ability of Gen AI to analyze information, I think is really really helpful. A lot of times what you're trying to do is analyze a threat. It's all about narrowing down, what are the things you really have to worry about and prioritize in security. And I think Gen AI is, proving to be pretty good at that. So I think it's a massive change for that. I mean, it's huge for so many industries, but I think in security, there's definitely some things where, it's kind of uniquely useful when it comes to security. Also, just in terms of training people, cybersecurity is notorious for the amount of open jobs and how hard it is to find qualified people. Gen AI has a lot it can do to help get you up to speed, help you to learn much more quickly what it is that you need to know how to do in order to, be on a security team.
Yeah, you mentioned the open jobs. There's 2 things I wanna kinda double down on with you. So the number is like 3.5 million unfilled security jobs are expected in the next 5 years, which is crazy to think about. And so when we're thinking about the speed of that's available to us when it comes to building these Gen AI models within cybersecurity, that is advantageous because then you're able to train people faster and get people in those 3.5 million jobs a little bit quicker. I kind of wonder about the speed versus accuracy, right? So is it something we can go fast and we're still accurate, or do we need more of those human eyeballs and analysts to make sure that we're being as accurate? Like what happens with those bots when we're okay, you see a threat, but is it hallucinating? How do you detect the different kind of things inside of the Gen AI space in order to make sure it's also accurate, right? What
Definitely.
are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I've actually heard very little, concern about that. I think that the way a lot of security teams work is they always do have a human. No one has completely automated it yet. And so I think that, for the really big, important decisions, I think humans still are the ones making those. And I think that is honestly one of the things I do hear a lot is that there isn't any concern about, just having a completely autonomous security team that, there's just too much on the line with cybersecurity that there always need to be humans. And so I think that it seems like it's proving to be pretty trustworthy for kind of the basic grunt work, involved of sifting through data and analyzing it and summarizing. I mean, I think with summarizing, if that's what they're using it for, which is I think a lot of times what it is, I think Gen AI has proven to, be pretty accurate as far as that goes. When you're trying to get it to tell you kind of, some kind of new piece of information, or find you something on the internet, sometimes it screws that up. But no, I haven't heard a ton of concern about that. But I think the saving thing is just that, yeah, there's always a person who's gonna, make, if there is a big decision to be made, I think it's usually gonna be a person, or maybe always gonna be a person making that. uh
I hope so. I hope it's always a person because, I'm concerned about the bots coming and taking over, right? Is that, what are you going to do in the zombie apocalypse question? It's like, no, what are you going to do when AI comes over and like tries to, when the robots start taking over,
Mm,
right?
mm.
Maybe that's a fan fiction that we need to work on in our free time when we're not reporting for things for CRN. So we talked a little bit about like those platforms and Gen AI. I wanted to kind of switch and talk what this means for partners. We've really been focusing on reporting on like partner enablement for 2025. That's a huge thing that CRN did a story on a few weeks ago. So with this push for AI driven security solutions from vendors, what are conversations from other industry leaders having about what helps partners navigate and stay competitive when it comes to this enablement for Gen AI or any part of their business?
Yeah, I mean, I think enablement definitely is something I'm hearing from a lot of channel chiefs is a growing focus, and maybe more important than it was even just a year or two ago. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for that, but I mean, I think one of the biggest ones is just that the partners just have so many choices, especially in cybersecurity. They have so many choices about different vendors to work with, and I think it really becomes kind of a differentiator for the vendor if their enablement is really streamlined and it is really quick for the partner to be able to get up and running and know the product and know, how to sell it and get to the point of actually making money from it as opposed to just having months and months of trying to get onboarded. I think that becomes a big differentiator for the vendors. And so I think that
Yeah.
that is a place that a lot of vendors in cybersecurity are investing, pretty heavily in terms of trying to make their enablement more modern and faster to get people, onboarded and actually selling things.
Yeah. So let's move. So, talking about partners, right? We've got these different models the MSP, the MSSP. It's a lot of alphabet soup, and there's some differentiators. Word on the street is you have a pretty hot take on MSP to MSSP transition. So, I guess I want to know what are your thoughts? Should every MSP be becoming an MSSP? Is that something that we need to be looking at? I know a lot of folks are really not just focusing on how they can provide cybersecurity, but having that be a core competency when it comes to their partnerships and their channel business. What are your thoughts? Is there something that we all should be becoming MSS?
Well, I mean, I think that all MSPs should be looking at cybersecurity and what they can offer there for sure. But that's not necessarily the same thing as becoming an MSSP. I think that, there is somewhat of a definition for becoming an MSSP, which is you become the security team for your customer, basically. And so that's a very different, set of skills than, a lot of MSPs have. A lot of MSPs, traditionally have been more focused on the IT side and they don't necessarily have all the stuff we were talking about earlier in terms of security teams and all the things that they have to do. There's a lot of different skills and competencies that security teams have versus someone who's managing an IT operation. And so I think MSP should certainly be looking at whether that's something that they want to move into. But I mean I think becoming an MSSP it's a pretty big deal. I think if you're saying that you're someone's security team, then you're essentially accepting the liability for what that means, among other things. There's a lot of other aspects to it, but just that alone, if you're saying that you're responsible for their security, if there's a breach, and you're not going to be able to say, well, we weren't really an MSSP, right? Like you're not going to be able to say, well, we didn't really mean that we were going to like take on their security. No, at that point you're liable, and you might end up going out of business because of it. So I think there's a potential here. There is definitely a lot of excitement about MSSP because it seems like a natural move, and it might be for some MSPs. It very much might be the next thing, and definitely should be exploring it. But I think that just it's like anything, know what you're signing up for before you get too far down the road on these things.
Yeah, yeah. And I think going back to the enablement question, there's so many different products and so many different things that with the vendors focusing on enablement, it might seem like it's easier to onboard and ramp up and all these things. But is that your core competency? Is that the thing that you're really wanting to stake your claim in? And if it is, great, more power to you, keep moving. But at the same time, making sure you're making smart business decisions and not just taking things on because that's what you think the market wants from you, right?
Absolutely.
Anything that we need to add or come back to or double click on? What do you think?
No, I mean, well, I think just, that last point about, getting involved in cybersecurity in some way, is definitely a good idea for all MSPs. I think there are other things you can do besides just becoming an MSSP and becoming a full-fledged cybersecurity team for your customer. There's different ways that you can advise customers on security. I think a lot of MSPs do that already. I mean, most MSPs do cybersecurity in some form, but they're not necessarily doing the MSSP model as a lot of people would define it. And for a lot of them, I think that's fine. But I think that there are all kinds of new opportunities in cybersecurity that they should be looking at, and I think a lot of them are. I think it's but as we were talking about earlier, as far as the talent shortage in cybersecurity, I mean that's a huge other aspect to it. That if you really want to be doing these cybersecurity services for people, I mean it's going to be difficult to do that without people who actually have expertise in cybersecurity, which is not cheap and not easy to find in 2025.
That was part one of our AI and cybersecurity deep dive with CRN's Kyle Alspach. Thank you so much, Kyle. Now let's take it from the newsroom to the front lines. Up next, we're bringing you on-location coverage from Exchange 2025, where Kyle was able to sit down with Neil Holm, founder and CEO of Impact Business Technology. The two of them break down how MSPs are evolving their tech stacks with AI and what frameworks are helping them stay sharp. Let's get into it.
I'm here with Neil Holm, founder and CEO of Impact Business Technology. Neil, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a bit about MSP and security. And I think, big question on my mind is how are MSPs evolving their security stacks in 2025? What are some of the biggest ways?
I think the first thing we've got to be looking at is AI-enabled security. That's the biggest threat we're facing right now. So we have to fight the machines with machines. It's kind of a sad place to be, but it's necessary. This is what's next.
And what are some of the specific ways that you're thinking about enabling security with AI?
So there is so much data to look at. We cannot possibly process it all. There are so many tools. We need to be able to tie everything together and react at machine speed because the attackers are using the same tools against us. So it's a speed, it's a volume. And it's a force multiplier for us. We don't really have a choice. And so we've been using it for quite some time, but its adoption is going to be accelerating, and the pace of adoption here also has to accelerate. It's a little scary.
Absolutely. And are there other examples outside of that, where you see a lot of evolution happening right now for MSPs and for your own security stack?
So the other thing we're looking at is really aligning very strictly with a established security framework or a security standard. We're using these frameworks. For example, we align ourselves with the CIS 18, and it allows us, or it forces us to look holistically at security rather than focused on a product or a service that we're buying and reselling.
I see. And that's, why is that becoming more and more important?
Well, we need to look at the much broader security landscape. The threats facing our customers, the regulatory burden that they're facing and we are facing is only going to increase. There might be a bit of a pause for the next 4 years, but it's certainly not going to go away. So we have to keep on evolving the way we look at security to keep up.
And what's your advice for other MSPs on when they're looking at these different frameworks? I know there's a number of different ones. How do they go about making the choice of which to focus on, or should they focus on multiple?
So I can tell you how we chose the CIS 18. It's nice because it's a graded system, meaning you can start small and you can keep on adding as you go through your maturity levels to get better and better. If you wanted to start with like the NIST 853, that is a monster, and you'll get disillusioned very quickly. So we chose the CIS 18 because it allows us to start small. And in fact, that's the journey we take our customers through too. We start them small and then we layer them up through the various implementation groups.
Well, going back to something you touched on earlier with the AI-enabled threats, I would love to hear a bit more just in terms of the landscape overall. I mean, are threats continuing to intensify, based on AI and other factors that your customers are seeing?
So I can't say that we've experienced an AI-enabled attack, so I can't talk directly to it, but I do know, I mean, I read a lot. Every vendor here is talking about it, about how the AI threat landscape is growing. And it makes a lot of sense. The tools that are out there for us to use on the defense can easily be turned around and used on the offense. It does scare me a little bit. And so, yeah, I'm here looking for ways to learn and ways to protect. We're always looking for bigger, better, faster, stronger, cheaper.
Yeah. And I mean, it strikes me that, I mean, you know, the whole thought with AI is that it's just going to continue finding new things it can do. So it's starting, you know, with being able to write, you know, for the attackers, being able to write better phishing emails and having, you know, phishing attacks be more successful. But I would imagine that there's all sorts of other things that are going to be coming that AI is going to enable attackers to do in the future as well.
Yeah, I think certainly the things it can do for us, such as process huge amounts of data quickly and find patterns quickly, it will do that for the attackers too. So the intensity of parsing through data that you've exfiltrated from one company, using that to infiltrate another, it's what I would do.
Yeah.
So yeah, why wouldn't the attackers? The ability to scan for breach credentials, the ability to scan for vulnerable systems, all of these things, they can multiply through AI. It's going to get faster. It's going to get, you know, the time between vulnerability discovered and vulnerability exploited is going to drop. We won't have time to patch because the attackers will be exploiting it right away.
Yeah. And I do hear that, I mean, this is almost a time period where, you know, AI is not necessarily being utilized by attackers the way it will be in the future, as we're talking about here. So this may be sort of a window of time where MSPs should be getting up to speed with what they can use AI for.
I think so. I think we are somewhat beholden to the vendors. We certainly don't have the skills in-house to develop these things on our own. I know what I'd like to see, and I got pretty good relationships with a few of my vendors to talk to them about this, but we are beholden to them to make these tools. And again, that's why we come to these events. It's a great way to learn.
Well, Neil, thank you so much for speaking with us. This has been really interesting. And thank you for watching. This has been CRN TV's on location coverage at Exchange 2025. Thank you.
From AI-enabled defenses to cybersecurity shakeups, it's clear that 2025 is shaping up to be a pivotal year for MSPs and security leaders alike. Big thanks to Neil Holm for sharing what's really happening on the ground. And thank you, Kyle, for guiding us through current trends. If you are a partner wondering how to stay competitive, consider this your call to action. Lean into AI, but do it smartly, align with a framework that fits your growth stage, and keep a close eye on how the field of cybersecurity is evolving. Thanks for watching the channel Angle. Be sure to follow and leave us a comment letting us know what challenges you'd like us to cover next. We're here to see the channel from every angle.